Hey up you lot. Apologies for no vinyl chat last week. Family stuff always seems to crop up on a Sunday and demand my attention. So there's been something kind of niggling me on my mind. And that's the fact that on everything I've got about me vinyl chat type stuff, it says punk, post-punk, whatever, psych, garage, bit of prog. It also says soundtracks, and I've not talked about soundtracks yet. And I've kind of been like obsessing about it, thinking, well, I've got to do something about soundtracks. And I thought about like soundtrack reviews, but I don't know. I don't know if focusing on one soundtrack could be interesting for people. And the more I've thought about it, I need to do a video about soundtracks because it says soundtracks on me, like little idents and stuff. The more I've kind of got like, oh, I really need to do a video about soundtracks. Come on, Al. Come on. What are you going to do about soundtracks? And I don't know. Right. This is, self-analytical a little bit. I'm obsessed with films. Not like, I love movies, I'm a movie buff. I'm like deep-rooted, like little woodlouse in a bit of wood anorak about films. Everybody around me despairs because, like, if there's a film I love, I'll buy it on Blu-ray. I haven't quite got a 4K set up, but that's fine for me. Especially my lad. My lad despairs because I'll get a movie that I love and I'll get a new Blu-ray of it and I'll dash home and watch it. And then straight away, I'll watch it again with a commentary on while it's fresh in my mind. I want to hear somebody involved in that film talk about it. And then I'll watch the interviews and then I'll watch and the special features. And that's kind of why I don't like streaming and don't really have any streaming services because it doesn't hit that obsessive behaviour target that I have, that I need to fulfill. I don't know if it's just me. Might not be. There might be other like people out there that do the same. But it's not even an unhealthy obsession. It's just literally an obsession. And a lot of the films I really love are like 70s and 80s Euro horror. Not to be edgy or shun big budget Hollywood things, releases. That's just the niche I've kind of found myself in and focused on, and the rabbit hole that I have well and truly tumbled down. So I've pulled out some soundtracks that I love for good reason. And I've pulled out some soundtracks that I love for no good reason at all. And I guess the first film I saw that I kind of started to get how films fit together. Because it's everything. It's the script, it's the director's style, it's what the actors bring to it, it's the special effects people, it's the production designers, it's everything coming together. And really importantly, it's the soundtrack. And the first soundtrack I heard, I saw a double bill of two Lucio Fulci films, Zombie Flesh Eaters and The Beyond, and that just set me off. It wasn't even a gradual thing. I'd already started buying John Carpenter soundtracks and John Carpenter compilations just because I adored that kind of synth thing that he does, and like a lot of the best soundtracks to his films he composed, which I think is genius. Like, he wrote it, directed it, composed the music. It's so much his vision. But yeah, it was Zombie Flesh Eaters and The Beyond. Got my Death Waltz Zombie Flesh Eaters, which does get played an awful lot. And I've got The Beyond as part of the Gates of Hell trilogy. Lovely box set thing. And with Zombie Flesh Eaters and The Beyond, there was something ugly about that music, but also beautiful and thoroughly captivating. I do like soundtracks from my favourite films because it reminds me of the film. And as much as I admire the whole Hans Zimmer kind of sweeping orchestral score, it's the kind of proggy or synthy soundtracks that I really find myself drawn to. And those, I kind of, it was the early days of the internet, so I went online and looked at who did the music, and it was this chap called Fabio Frizzi, who did a lot of Lucio Fulci's soundtracks. That's the soundtrack for Manhattan Baby. And yeah, it wasn't like a gradual, hey, I'm interested in these. It was like a weird instant obsession. I do display obsessive behaviour with horror. And I don't really know why it is all about horror. And people have said to me, is every day Halloween for you? And it's like, it so is. Every day is a horror movie or a trashy horror paperback. And if I'm sat drawing and working, I'll be listening to horror soundtracks. And I kind of don't know why. I haven't got a script for this video. It's kind of like, I need to do a video about soundtracks, so let's just start chatting and see where it goes. Just pull out some soundtracks that you love and see where it takes you. Another band I adore that did some amazing soundtracks is Goblin. I know this. The soundtrack for The Church had Keith Emerson as well, and it's just beautiful. It's glorious. But so I do love that film. I really love The Church. I think The Church and The Sect are just corking movies. The Church being slightly better than The Sect. It must be a nostalgia thing as well, because a lot of these are kind of part of my horror growing up, hunting out videotapes of films and figuring out directors that I like and producers that I like. But yeah, Goblin is a constant. I think Goblin and Claudio Simonetti and the current Goblin, because there's two Goblins obviously. Like now, there's Claudio Simonetti's Goblin and there's like another Goblin with most of the original members, both of which are wonderful. And I found as when I was a lot younger, that there was still a lot of films banned on the DPP Video Nasties list. And you tell me I can't have something, and I want it. So as soon as the government said, can't have these movies because they're too harsh for you, I'm like, yeah mate, I want to see those movies even more now. And a lot of VHS collectors back in the late 80s, early 90s, we used that DPP list as a guide for what to try and get your hands on. And a lot of them were like Italian splatter films. And I'm trying not. I'm not a pretentious guy. I'm just a guy. But there's something so magical about that era and films produced from that nation that is just, it almost like transports me away. Another favourite, I've got quite a few of the old the Cannibal movies. This is the soundtrack to Umberto Lenzi's Eaten Alive by I forget now Roberto Donati. Always followed the same kind of structure soundtrack-wise. You get like a funky opening and then a theme that continued in an ugly synthesizer sound throughout the film. Or with Deodato's Cannibal Holocaust, it's such a beautiful piece of opening music. It's enchanting and, yeah, beautiful. But the backdrop is these atrocities that are happening on screen. And it's not just Italian ones. One of my all-time favourite soundtracks is Last House on the Left. Largely written by David Hess, who played Krug in the film, who wrote some songs for Elvis Presley. That was his main source of revenue, the royalties from the songs that Elvis and Roy Orbison sang. But yeah, he also did. He was an actor in some really despicable movies. How cool is that? But this is Last House on the Left is another one that it's got some very, very hauntingly beautiful, poignant, forlorn songs in it. With Last House on the Left alongside some kind of crazy experimental electronic sounds and stuff. But it's just, I wish I could try and, I've been trying to understand it so I could talk about it like in my own head. My obsessive behaviour with soundtracks. And my soundtrack collection isn't huge. These two boxes are soundtracks. Because soundtracks are a bit more expensive, they seem to keep their value. You know, if there's a cool old psychedelic reissue, it comes out and it's medium expensive. But then as it's a limited market, so as more people get it, there's less demand for it and the price starts to drop. That's kind of how I pick up a lot of the Prop Gun Psych reissues that I get. I'm also kind of obsessed with a weird subgenre of films, and that's like retro future. So films that are set in the distant future of the year 2000, where there's been some mad apocalypse and gangs rule the streets. Mainly it's like Italian release films that are an amalgam of some beloved John Carpenter type stuff, and then like Warriors and Mad Max. And one thing I think I love about a lot of Italian films is that they take what's popular at the minute, and they'll take like 3 or 4 ideas for what's popular at the minute, mash them all together, and throw out this mad, action-packed cheese fest that is just constantly thrilling and exciting all the way through. Films like 2019 After the Fall of New York, or the Warriors of the Wasteland trilogy and stuff like that. But my obsession with soundtracks goes further than that, because I've got soundtracks for films that I'm not really into the film, but the soundtrack is amazing. There's nothing wrong with The Boogeyman. It's alright. I watched it as part of the restricted... It was on the restricted videos list. But the soundtrack's great. It's an absolute corker, like repetitive synth Halloween ripoff. But they've done it so well and so nicely. So I've got soundtracks for films that I'm not even really into the film. I've seen the film, but it's not something I'd spend a lot of money to get like a really lovely Blu-ray release of it with all the whistles and bells and extras. Another composer I'm quite obsessed with is Morricone. This is the soundtrack for Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion. But it's not I don't do this to be pretentious. It's not the sweeping score from the mission. It's the weird, darker, discordant stuff, the psychedelic strangeness. Releases like Secret Morricone and these is it At the Movies? Yeah. The recent At the Movies compilations. They're awesome. And they're the Morricone that I love. And like I said, I'm not trying to be like, oh yeah, his big orchestral stuff is too mainstream. I want the obscure stuff. It's not that. I just love that strange, discordant thing that he did. And then through soundtracks, I've got into bands like Buio Mondo and Zoltan that like do soundtrack sounding records. I know Zoltan they did. We've never had a good release of the Tombs of the Blind Dead soundtrack, so they did like a mini album where it's 4 tracks, 4 long tracks, and each track is like a cut down version of the soundtrack from each of the Blind Dead movies. And it's not like my love of prog, because I don't really have a love of prog actually. I'm very fond of the certain prog bands that I really like, but there's a lot of prog that I don't like. So it's not like that leaking over into my soundtrack obsession. But I am completely obsessed with soundtracks. And I'm sorry, this video is about nothing. It's about very little. It's just me going, why am I obsessed with soundtracks? Here's some I'm obsessed with. But I want it. It's been on my mind that I haven't done a soundtrack video. And it's something that, you know, I've done punk and psych and garage, and I've got lots of ideas for videos that I will do for like the vinyl chat, but I don't know how to bring in soundtracks. So I thought, yeah, grab some soundtracks, just sit down and chat about them, and that might break the seal, as it were, and help me move forward in talking about soundtracks. Maybe my horror obsession is moderately unhealthy, I don't know. Not necessarily the love of horror. It's not the horror that corrupts me. It's the obsessive behaviour that surrounds it for me, and horror. A lot of the kind of post-punk bands that I love are dark and unsettling. And for some reason that makes me happy. And to listen to dark and unsettling music seems to soothe my brain quite considerably. So Victor's had a very sleepy week. Don't know what he's been dreaming of. Probably mackerel. So I shall leave my psychological self-analysis there, and we'll call it a day. Before I start like getting myself on a couch and really getting into some of them brain worms. I hope you're all well. Thank you for tuning in, guys. And I'm sure there'll be more structured and sensible soundtrack videos. But we'll probably be back to like punk, garage, psych, new wave next week. So thank you for watching, and stay safe, you lot.